if you could pull, I have it pulled up too if you don't.
I should be able to find it. Okay, I found it.
Okay, so first I want to celebrate success. These are topics that are all completely new to kids.
Yeah.
This is one unit where I felt like they didn't have any previous knowledge, maybe a teeny weeny bit of weathering and erosion, but
Yeah.
not really. So what are some successes you've had this unit?
From unit 3 or the one we're doing right now?
Unit 3.
Well, my numbers overall were higher, even down to like.
So what's a specific learning goal or standard that you felt was really successful?
Well, obviously gravity and magnetism.
What do you think?
Well,
about how you taught that.
Well, that one was the one we spent reteach. We did a reteach on gravity specifically, which helped with that. And then magnetism was the one that they were just really super strong on from the first time. And it was kind of like what they were doing with electricity today. They just got to play with the materials and test it.
So what was different between how you taught gravity the first time and your reteach? Do you remember?
I think I was stamping it more with the reteach, like specifically saying like this happens because of gravity. Instead of just saying like gravity and then giving all these examples, but like just using that same language, like this happens because of gravity. So they just got that repetition a lot because there was a lot of there were some constructive responses about gravity.
And I remember you did something with magnetism also. Because I remember doing a reteach in one of our weekly data meetings.
Oh yeah, I did for the retake exit ticket. I modeled like. I put the two magnets and I modeled like when they got closer together that they came together in that part of it so they could see like distance affects the force of gravity or magnetism.
Okay.
Just being strategic with how I like retaught it and reviewed it and stuff.
And that's what we're going to focus on this unit. So today we're going to dive into your reteach lesson and then I sent you some calendar invites yesterday. I'm not sure if that's the exact time. I need to actually really think about that, but
for
doing
Wednesdays.
I want to do what we did for that magnet lesson and like really dive into an exit ticket together and dive into what is that misunderstanding and how can you do a slight little tweak to reteach.
No, is it Tuesdays or is it Wednesdays?
So I have a coaching session for us on Mondays and I have on Tuesdays the data meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think through what works best. What we think would be the highest leverage thing. So like what I'm doing with some teachers is I'm having them, since yours, for example, is Tuesday afternoon, what they would give me is Monday afternoon exit tickets from that day or from a previous day. So I'm thinking through what would make the most sense for our 5th grade.
I think what makes sense is Tuesdays.
I want to have about 20 minutes myself to look at the data before you get in. One thing that I also thought about is we have power standards for this upcoming unit, and we could think about what are the power standards, and those are things we know we'd probably have to reteach or review anyway, and like the week before decide on like, okay, at the end of this day I'm going to copy the exit tickets and give you that days. What do you think about that?
The only thing I'm concerned about with not doing it the day of is that because of the way that I do my reteaches.
I knew you were going to say this.
I'm going to have to clean up a cat here too.
Okay. I knew you were going to say this.
That's the only issue is that like if we look at Mondays on Tuesday afternoon, then like I've already given them the chance to retake Monday's exit ticket on Tuesday. Where with Tuesdays, like it plans out how I'm going to address it the next day if I need to address it.
Okay. Then we'll table that and let me think on that, but that's okay. Because we'll start it next week. But for now, I want to dive into your analysis is always really great, very thorough. I loved your plans for addressing these multiple choice questions. I want to dive into this scientific tools.
Yeah.
So what is this standard? This is from the performance task?
Yeah. Well, performance tasking just anytime there's a scientific method type question on the IA.
So what part of that like learning objective have they mastered, and what part do they know? But like, what part of a question like this, what parts do they?
On that one,
Mm-hmm.
that
So
This-
thinking
they
back
did
to the
really
student
bad.
work.
they'd never seen a question like this.
Okay.
That
So-
was the problem. Like the way that we've addressed it is specifically like we're doing that like that on the Do Now Today. It had something like this where it was a picture,
Mm-hmm.
and they used that to with a description to pick out what the independent and the dependent variable was, what the scientific tool was. But like up to this point, it's just been kind of like what they missed was the distance that we're measuring distance, and the only one there were 3 choices. I don't think I was able to fit the third choice on here, but from the IA because it was cut off on the paper copy.
So the kid didn't see the third choice?
They didn't. No, they did. On the computer, they did. The paper version didn't. It was cut off.
So
The issue was they didn't catch that. The only choice that had a ruler was this choice. So that should have clued them into this is the right answer because of distance, and they didn't. They missed it completely.
okay. So what is the major misunderstanding then?
Of
I think I heard you say it, but say it in one
that
sentence.
the ruler is used to measure distance. So if they're measuring distance as a dependent variable, that you would choose the ruler tool. They didn't make that connection.
So going back to this question, when I was first thinking about it, it says a student wanted to know if a small object and a large object would travel different distances when pushed with the same force. Yeah. I can see why they would pick the
It was
stopwatch.
tricky. It was a tricky question.
I'm
Regardless.
trying to, let's think about why might a student pick the stopwatch.
I have no idea.
And sometimes students think that
I mean, unless they're just
the
focusing on
faster
large,
it goes, the farther it's gonna go.
or just they looked at small object and large object.
Okay, there's one. Because there's one misunderstanding, I think, because clearly in this visual of the 2 rockets and the 2 marbles, like the size difference between the rockets is much more drastic than the marbles.
Yes.
So 1 was the most common response.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a mistake even at the high school level. Students really pick stopwatch in these distance cases. There is a misconception, I think, having farther, faster.
Well, speed. Measuring
Yeah.
speed, you have to use time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do we get at that? Like, is it a conceptual misunderstanding of like measuring
I don't-
speed versus distance?
I don't think it's a
or
conceptual-
is it a skill?
I think it's a skill.
Or is it a tool? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's the skill of being able to like figure out like when you're measuring something, what's the appropriate tool to measure what you're looking for.
And what student work do you have to support that hypothesis?
All of our students, whenever we have a
So
do
what
now.
what are
So
the things
what was
they
on
say?
it today?
Okay.
They leave it blank. They have, which is why I want to just do a full lesson on it, where they have like a description of an experiment, and they have on a chart where they have to write down the independent and dependent variable, what tool they would use and what measure. Like 90% of them
So how does
are
independent
leaving it blank.
how does independent variable, dependent variable relate to this?
Well, they pick the independent and dependent variable, so they would say, okay, the independent variable is the size of the object, which they can tell me that, and then distance, and then they say, okay, for the distance, they have to measure, like what scientific tool do you use to measure your dependent variable? A ruler, and then you have the tool. There's a, let me show you today's do now. It's on here. It's like this. Where they have to list out what the variables are. Like this has been on a do now once a
So
week
using
for the
scale.
last unit.
A student using a spoon scale to pull a 50-gram block where the others were just then the student pulled the same block with carpet, same gram glass. The independent variable is the surface, and the
Mhm.
dependent variable is the force.
A lot of them said distance today when we did this, but that's because of they told that.
Do they necessarily need to know the independent and dependent variable though to answer this question?
No, but they have to know. But it's not even so much independent, dependent. It's the tool itself.
Right.
Picking out
And
the
so
tool.
I think like by adding I'm fearing that by adding the independent and dependent variable, are you adding to
But it's a thinking step. It's like, okay, what are we measuring? They know dependent variable is something we're measuring. So before you say what scientific tool do you need to measure this, you give them the frame of like, what are you measuring this experiment? I'm measuring distance. What do you need to measure distance? A ruler.
I hear you, I just wonder if it's overcomplicating things.
I don't think so, not if we have to keep pushing the skill of independent and dependent variable, which we have to for performance tasks.
Have you explicitly taught them like tool in relation to dependent variable?
We did as separate, like, when we went over each individual tool.
So
Like the triple beam balance, this, like, when we did a lesson just on triple beam. A lot of this is from started from unit 1, and it's just still an
and
issue.
it's gonna keep showing up in performance tests. So how did you teach tools in relation to dependent variable before?
When we taught, like, those individual tools.
How? Like for example, triple beam balance, how did you state that?
So we would have, like, when we did the triple beam balance, we took notes. What does the triple beam balance measure? It measures mass. What unit do we use to measure mass? Grams. And then they practiced it. And then
That doesn't necessarily tie back to the dependent variable, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, and I mean, honestly, that was back in, like, August.
Right, so how do we make the connection between a dependent variable is something you're measuring and you use a tool to do it?
Right. Well, I think that's how I have the reteach set up, is for that.
Right, but I want to hear what that sounds like, because I think that, like, even though they have that chart, they're not making that understanding. Like, what is the verbiage you're going to use to explain that?
Well, I mean, it's what I like. What's being measured?
Right, so
What
there's a
tool
gap
using?
between dependent variable and knowing that the tool is used for it, right? Like, because right here, if you look at on your reteach that showed the model, you said my dependent variable is being measured. Notice here it says different distances, and then it says I need to decide which tools are useful. Even what language could you add there to tie that to dependent variable? You know what I'm saying?
Well, you can't measure something without a tool to measure. Like, you
Mhm.
go off the word measurement.
Because right now you're kind of just like stating the same thing. We need to make the connection between a dependent variable. Yes, it's something we measure. And you
So I
use
would
a
say
tool.
something like to measure. You can't.
Take a minute. This is the meat of it reteach, so take a minute.
I would just say you have to measure. You have to measure with the tool. So which tool is used? So which tool would you need? I think I need to use that language just because that's common.
You still didn't use the language of dependent variable though. There's still like not that connection.
But the measurement term, that's what's connecting
Right.
them.
So I would say like, right now it says you have to measure with the tool. So I would say something like, so we just said dependent variable involves measuring, and you have to have a tool to do the measuring for your dependent variable.
Okay.
So say that again.
We just said you have to measure the dependent variable. You have to use a tool to measure the dependent variable. So which tool would be the most useful?
To measure the dependent variable. I think the more you can use that language, the better. Just like kind of bringing it back full circle off the beginning of the meeting, the more explicit you are with that language for gravity, the more it's stuck.
Okay.
So the connection between dependent variable and measurement tool is not being made yet. So is this something that students are writing this one here where it says underline my variable, or this is what you're saying?
I don't remember. I have to look at the lesson.
Can you pull it up?
They're annotating with me is the biggest thing that they're doing. Yeah, they're annotating, because I'm annotating the distances and marking it as independent and dependent, and then I'll circle the ruler when we get to that point. So they're watching me and annotating, and then discussing what I did, and then we're marking down here the underline, annotate, and then choose the right tool.
Okay. Before this, what are you measuring?
That's where we're just going back through and reviewing, so they have notes. Like if we're using a triple beam balance, we're measuring mass, just reinforcing. So when we get down to this part, and they say what tool we need to measure that, they have notes to look back to.
So that makes sense to me, this part here, because this is getting at the key misunderstanding that I saw in that question, which is like knowing distance and then getting something to measure the distance.
Right.
But this thing up here that I see in the lesson, is this a misunderstanding? You're having to match a picture to the name of the tool. Is that a skill that they're struggling with?
On some, yeah, like the spring scale, like some of that part of it. It was just a way to kind of like engage the lesson.
What percentage of kids are struggling with that though?
Oh, I don't have a specific number on that.
Right, so I would argue that this is probably going to take how long?
It won't take very long, not more than like a couple minutes. Because they're just matching.
But the misunderstanding, the way I understood in this question was the, distance and knowing it's a ruler. Not like saying pick the ruler. I'm just not sure how much this is needed.
Well, okay. I mean, the thing is there needs to be some sort of engagement activity to pull them in. Because if I start with this, I won't have.
I agree. I'm wondering if, you had something like
I could do the picture instead of the tool. I could have the picture and what it measures instead of the name of the tool.
Yeah, you could do you could have words. You could have I do think you should have pictures of all the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could do something I think it's good to do the pictures and the words and maybe have something like distance or how far or speed or this, that, or the other thing, and have them match those things to the tool.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this wouldn't be a tool. This would be.
But it's not a verb necessarily. No. It's a quantity.
They won't understand that.
It's a dependent variable.
Mm-hmm.
How far? How high? How long? Those are all things that go with length in a ruler.
But it wouldn't all be rulers. It's the different tools.
Right. But I'm just giving examples.
Okay.
I would use the most common pictures and the most common descriptors and have them match them.
Okay.
Because that's going to help them, again, when they read distance in a question, be able to do that. So what are we measuring? And that's having them go backwards from the tool, which is even better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
let's get back into this, because this is what we were talking about earlier. You're gonna model this for the kids. Right here, show me. How does it sound?
That's exactly what I put here. Well, I can edit it because we changed it from the DDI. But I mean, it's the same concept. Like I would say that when this question that IA many of us missed because we didn't connect what we were measuring with the tool that we needed. So I'm going to say I want you to listen and watch as I model for you, and I want you to annotate when you see me annotate.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would read this,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would say I would notice that what's different and what's being tested is small object and large objects, and underline them.
Mm-hmm.
Say I noticed that what we're measuring is different distances.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we'll ask for this because they should know that. Which one is the independent, which one's dependent.
Good.
Okay. And then they would connect that, and then they would say a dependent. I know that a dependent variable is something that's measured. In order to measure my dependent variable, I have to have a tool to measure it with.
Great. And that closes that gap that we just revised for DDI.
Yeah. And then I'll say, so I'll notice since my dependent variable is distance, I need to measure that distance. What tool am I going to need for that? I know that to measure distance, I need a ruler, and I'll circle a ruler.
Great. Do you have another question like this on this reteach lesson?
I mean, all of them are like a picture experiment, a description, picking out what they need.
This is tough.
All of these they've seen before.
This one is very tough.
Yeah, but I think they would be fine. The only one they wouldn't know, and I need to go through this, is there's not a tool or a unit for the independent variable. So I need to cross that off, which I did like all the way we had it on today's. Because really, very rarely do they have to measure the independent variable, unless it's like something like this, temperature, or like the one today on the do now was force and spin scale.
Okay. I'm looking for the exit ticket on here also. Here we go. So they tell me what they're doing on this exit ticket.
Same concept, so independent variable, they would say that it's the liquid. And then dependent would be temperature, so time. So they would use a stopwatch and measure in seconds. And then the liquids, I would just put NA for those ones.
Okay. Can you, I'm gonna come watch this, that's what we're talking about too. Can you annotate the exemplar response to this?
Mm-hmm. Do it from Drive.
This, you need to add another question to the exit ticket also, because this is a different style of question than the one that we had those major misconceptions on. So this is just pulling out from one scenario. Whereas this question that they really struggled with gives them the scenario and they have to choose the setup.
Yeah, I had a hard time finding one like it though. That was the struggle that I had with that. Without using the same problem. Like, I just couldn't find one.
You could say a smooth object or a rough object would travel fastest. And do like a smooth ball and like a spiky ball and a stopwatch or something.
Wait, say that again?
Because this question says a student wanted to know if a small object and a large object would travel different distances when pushed with the same force. You could say a student wanted to know if a smooth object and a rough object would travel faster when pushed with the same force. Which type of supplies would best answer this question? So you change that, instead of small and large, you could change it to smooth and rough. And instead of distance, you can say, you know, speed or something.
Right, but am I doing no pictures? That's where the struggle, that's where
I mean,
I
you
run
could
into,
do-
that's where I run into the problem, is like,
You could give them two choices, and you could do like, well, for the pictures, you would do like, for example, the first picture would be like a smooth ball and a rough ball and a stopwatch. The second would be a smooth ball, rough ball, and a ruler. And the third one could be like two smooth ones and a stopwatch or something.
okay,
You just have to
I would
create
have to,
your own.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just okay,
You can, use Google Images and or another thing you can do if you don't feel like doing Google Images is you can like find random stuff in your room and set up 3 scenarios and take a picture and do it that way. Because I do think that this is something that's very common on the performance task is a scenario and you have to choose the setup.
okay.
Or hey, you have to have a setup and you have to analyze it. So it's worth diving into that setup. Because that is tricky for kids too. Because usually we give them everything they need.
Right. Okay,
So I'm gonna come watch this on the 12th, which is
it's this Thursday.
this Thursday. Great.
Okay. Alright, I will add that in. Just figure out time to do that. Okay.
If it's something that you need help with, please let me know. But I think I
Just
know
let
it's
me know.
worth it.